A year prior the continuation war, Finland had fought bravely to preserve its independence during the Winter War. The costs of it were huge. Finland lost over 25,000 soldiers, with tens of thousands more wounded and nearly 10% of its territory. Winter War ended with a Moscow peace treaty in 1940. Finland was forced to cede significant territories. These losses left deep wounds in the national consciousness and ignited a strong desire to recover the land and restore national pride. Although the nation emerged resilient, the peace was fragile and darker days loomed ahead. By mid-1941, Europe was engulfed in the flames of World War II, and Finland stood alone, isolated, desperately seeking allies. Attempts to secure alliances with Sweden and Britain failed. Pressure from Nazi Germany intensified, offering Finland a dangerous opportunity. Join them in their invasion of the Soviet Union and recover lost territories. On June 22, 1941, as Operation Barbarossa began, German forces stormed Soviet borders in a massive surprise offensive. Although Finland had not yet formally entered the war, it was preparing. Finnish troops began to mobilize, and German aircraft were granted access to Finnish airfields to launch operations against Soviet targets. Just 3 days later, on June 25th, the Soviet Union responded with a wave of air raids on Finnish cities. Finland interpreted these bombings as an act of war and reacted with starting its pre-prepared offensive along with German troops that were already stationed and ready for this action. This is the beginning of what we know as the Continuation War. Finnish and German troops launched separate offensives and quickly overwhelmed Soviet forces in their respective sectors. Finnish soldiers, often equipped with bicycles, decimated disorganized Soviet troops. At this point in the war, Finnish forces were advancing at a pace of up to 30 kilometers per day, and there were no Soviet units capable of stopping their advance. Finland managed to recapture the city of Viipuri by August 21st. One of Finland's most significant military successes came shortly after, during the Battle of Polami. In this engagement, Finnish troops encircled and destroyed 2 Soviet divisions, capturing more than 10,000 soldiers. One of the most notable captures was General Vladimir Kirpichnikov, the highest-ranking Soviet officer to fall into enemy hands during the entire war. Finnish troops then approached Soviet Leningrad, but they deliberately chose not to directly attack the city. The reasoning behind this decision was to avoid provoking the Soviets further and to preserve the possibility of exiting the war in the future. Though Germany and Finland were advancing rapidly in the summer of 1941, Marshal Mannerheim grew increasingly uneasy. He doubted Germany's ability to capture key Soviet cities and feared a long war. As a result, he carefully chose where the Finnish advance would stop, aiming to secure a defensible line in case of a Soviet counteroffensive rather than overextend Finnish forces. As Germany faced catastrophic losses at Stalingrad in 1943, Finland recognized its increasingly vulnerable position and intensified diplomatic efforts to exit the war. Through intermediaries such as Sweden and the United States, Finland cautiously explored secret peace negotiations with the Soviet Union, but the initial Soviet terms demanding Finland's unconditional surrender were deemed unacceptable, causing these early attempts to stall. Consequently, when the Soviet Union regained strength and launched the massive Vyborg-Petrozavodsk offensive in June 1944, Finnish defenses were rapidly overwhelmed and critical territories reclaimed by Soviet forces. Yet Finland rallied fiercely, halting the Soviets at the Battle of Tali-Ihantala, which was the largest battle in Nordic history. Though costly, this victory prevented Finland's complete collapse and stunned the Soviets, who saw next offensives to be too costly, opening the door to an armistice. Recognizing Germany's inevitable defeat, Finnish leaders secretly negotiated peace, signing the Moscow Armistice in September 1944. The terms were harsh. Finland had to cede even more land, including access to the Barents Sea. However, Finland's trials were not yet over. In September 1944, as part of the armistice with the Soviet Union, Finland was forced into a painful position. It had to expel German troops from its territory. These same troops had fought alongside the Finns just months earlier against the Soviets. Now, Finland was obligated to drive them out or risk renewed Soviet aggression. At first, Finnish leaders hoped the Germans would retreat peacefully, and indeed, the German army began withdrawing northward through Lapland. But under Soviet pressure and growing suspicion, Finland launched military operations to force their exit. In response, German forces carried out a scorched earth retreat, destroying everything in their path to slow the Finnish advance. Bridges, roads, railways, and homes were systematically demolished. Entire towns were reduced to ashes. Rovaniemi, the capital of Lapland, was almost completely destroyed, reportedly set ablaze after a German ammunition train exploded. Though the war lasted only a few months, it caused immense devastation. Tens of thousands of civilians were displaced, and northern Finland was left in ruins. After immense suffering, Finland finally emerged from the war battered but sovereign, facing years of reconstruction and heavy war reparations owed to the Soviets. During the Cold War, Finland adopted a careful and pragmatic policy known as Finlandization, maintaining a delicate neutrality and cautious cooperation with the Soviet Union while preserving close ties with Western nations. This unique position allowed Finland to avoid Soviet occupation and remain independent, becoming a bridge between East and West. This balancing act showcased Finland's resilience and diplomatic skill in navigating the complex geopolitics of the Cold War era, ensuring both national sovereignty and economic prosperity.